How will you contribute to the world today in a way that only you can? Ponder that question as you dive into today's episode of the Leap Beyond Success podcast with Micheline Nader. Every episode is designed to help you lean into your passion, execute from your purpose, align your mindset, and program your emotions so that you can leap into the world and show up as who you want to be in the world for yourself and for whoever you choose to serve. Let's dive in and evolve together. Enjoy the conversation. Hello there, and welcome back to the Leap Beyond Success podcast with Micheline Nader. I'm your co-host today, once again, Trace Haskins, and it's an honor to be here with you today, our beloved audience, as well as you, Micheline. I always enjoy being together in the conversations that unfold. Today's episode is all about reframing your narrative and changing your life. And I'm going to add on to that and say your career and your business and your impact and your leadership and whatever other changes you might want to make and whatever other ways you might want to show up powerfully in the world. So that's what today is all about. And so we're going to have a great conversation. Micheline, thank you very much for being here with us. I want to start off with a little quote here. You may have heard it before. I think it's so powerful, and it really applies to what we're about to talk about today. And it's that a thought is just a thought, and don't believe every thought that you think, because we have these narratives, and the narratives really shape our world and our experience of our world and the way that we show up as creators and leaders in life. So, Micheline, thank you for being with me today and with us today. And to start us off, I'd love to hear, what is your definition of a narrative? And maybe you have a couple of examples of good and bad narratives that you might want to share.
Thank you, Trace. It's so exciting to be together and talking to our audience, as usual. Okay, my definition of a narrative is narratives are how life occurs to all of us. We occur in a narrative. We occur in a conversation. And everything is about narratives. Even banking is a narrative. It is stock options are narratives, how we describe them. A culture is a narrative in our organization. What we think about ourselves is a narrative. So narrative is a very important thing. It's like all the thoughts that we have that put together that create the context in which we occur as human beings.
That's pretty massive, right?
Yeah.
It really does shape our reality, right? The reality that we're experiencing. So if we have a certain narrative, would you say that the narrative, it impacts us mostly, or it impacts the way that we interact with other people mostly, or all the above, or what's really the implications of whatever narrative we're holding about a particular topic?
So the narrative in which you occur is also your thoughts, your beliefs, your stories about yourself, but also about other people. So it certainly affects you. It certainly affects the people around you as well. How we occur to other people or how we judge other people is also allows for the space. I mean, if this is the space that we're creating between you and me, then you have that space in which you occur in my eyes, in my experience, in my life, in my reality. So it's all about narratives. And that's why, as human beings and people in society and leaders, this is an aspect that we cannot overlook. And if we're not conscious of the importance of narratives, then the narratives that we occur within unconsciously dictate who we're becoming on a daily basis, on a daily interaction with others. So it's of utmost importance to be conscious of these narratives and to lead our life and affect our life in an impactful way. If we want to do that, then we have to be sensitive to their narratives. That whatever is occurring within in order to shift it if we want to change it. If we're happy with it, that's great. But if we want to shift it, it means that there are some currents within those narratives that make things happen a certain way.
So I think I have an interesting question. If we're happy with the narrative that we have right now, should we feel attached to that narrative because we like it so much? Or should we kind of still be maybe committed to it, but not necessarily attached to it, kind of like still keep an open mind? How do you feel about that? Like, what is there any value in being attached if we really love the narrative that we've got?
Look, if the narrative is positive, is great, but things happen, right? Things are not static. I hope that things are happening and are changing. So if the narrative is a narrative of origin, let's say it's a narrative about yourself that I can do whatever comes my way, is a great narrative, right? Why would you want to change this narrative? Because when this narrative helps you, whatever comes your way, to deal with it. Now, if the narrative is, oh, I can never get it right, or every time my life works, then something happens, a shoe drops or something, then this is what we're manifesting in life, because whenever things are right, we don't register them. But whenever things are wrong, we're here reinforcing this negative and narrative, and that helps to change it. Now, it's the narrative, if the narrative that we're talking about is static, and what I mean by static is not changing because it's attached to a certain circumstance. Like I have something in my life and it's outside of myself and I'm attached to that thing, then the narrative becomes static and attached to a circumstance in our life. This is going to change. It's going to be bound to change because those circumstances cannot be eternal, right? You can't be young eternally. You cannot be on top of your game eternally. We're in a moving narrative according to the circumstance. So the most important and the most essential thing in here is to be conscious of our narratives and to question, as you said, the thoughts and beliefs that come our way. Because if we take them and we fixate them and we say, we're occurring within this idea of me being a very successful entrepreneur. And I feel good about myself because I'm a very successful entrepreneur. The day my enterprise is not successful, then my belief about myself is shaken. Here I'm like, oh, I'm not a successful entrepreneur. Or, oh, I shake it. This was just one project that failed, but I am a successful entrepreneur and I can move on to the next one. This means that it's good to fixate that thought of I'm going to be successful no matter what, because failure is part of success. And it doesn't matter if I'm successful or I'm not successful. because I can make things happen. So this, you don't need to shift that, because this is a great belief about yourself. But when you talk to people, and you talk to leaders, and you talk to whoever, we always have a certain belief in ourselves that is not always that positive, but very many times either we hide it, we don't want to see it, or it's so unconscious that it's um, leading us and leading some of our actions, um, and we're not aware of. So this is the belief that tends to be a very resistant belief to change, because the origin of this belief, like let's say I'm not good enough, or I can't do anything, or I'm not lovable. So very many times, if you look at people's and relationship, and you see that, okay, their life works at work, but it's not working in relationships, right? It may work at work, and they're very successful at work because they're results oriented, their outcome, that they execute really well, they're clear on the goals, they could have great tactics, and they're very successful at work. Yet you look sometimes at their life personally, and you see that they go from one partner to another, and they repeat the same mishap, or the same thing happens to them again and again and again and again. Very many times, um, that narrative about themselves is that, oh, I'm not lovable, or I, I can't be in a relationship. If they're bothered by the circumstances that this narrative has created in their life, well, we better change it in that case, and not be attached to it, because it's affecting our life no matter what.
That's great. Yeah, what I think I hear you saying is also it's important to separate your narrative from particular events, right? Let's say something happened and you formed a narrative around that happening, and now suddenly the world occurs perpetually in that same way to you, when that doesn't necessarily have to be the way things are, especially if it's a negative pattern that you don't want to see recreated, right? But I think that's what we have a tendency to do: is something negative happens, we form a narrative about that situation and or ourselves and any number of other things. And as you pointed out, it happens unconsciously, right? And so we end up living this pattern for who knows, weeks, months, years, decades, right? Maybe forever and ever, amen, until we move on. So it's important to bring it to consciousness, so that we can really analyze, wait a minute, what parts of this narrative that I've got are true, what parts are not true. And even if something seems fact-based inside the narrative, in my personal experience, like I've looked at certain narratives that I've had, some in business and some in my relationship with my wife, for example, and I just looked at them as concrete, and this is how it is, and it's not never going to change. And um, but I got to the realization at one point that that's just a story that I'm telling, right? Like we started, don't believe every thought that you think, right? So I started to change those thoughts, and I started to change that belief in that narrative. I'm like, okay, things have been this way, and there's lots of evidence that I could bring up that says it's going to keep recurring. But what if not? Right? What if it can change? What if things can be different? Especially if I look at my own actions and way of being, what if I can show up in a little bit different way that's not in harmony with the narrative, right? How can that change things? So I don't know if you have anything more to share on that, but I think it's really, really valuable to separate events from narratives, and that can really make a big difference.
Absolutely. And trace is not easy to do. We're, as humans, we're meanings machines, and we make correlation between what happens and the meaning that we give to what happens. And it's not always easy for us to separate it from putting ourselves in the middle, where We're subjective meaning machines. And the more we have a narrative about other people, these these are the narratives that become very fixed about them. And people do not have room to occur in a different narrative, because they could, like your wife, or let's say your partner, would sometimes come from a good place and have a good idea. But if your idea about your partner is that he's risk averse, so before even your partner starts opening his mouth about a new project, you have in your narrative that I'm sure this project that he chose is risk averse, right? But this may not be so. And this may lead you into not looking into the situation for what it really is. So it's important for us to know that people occur to us in this narrative or conversation that we have in our head about them. And the more we catch ourselves with those narratives or those thoughts, then we can clean them up. We can make an effort. Like, okay, I'm meeting with my partner, and today in my listening, and this occurs in the listening. So when we talk about narratives, we can't really dissociate it from our listening, because our narratives make us behave a certain way, listen to people in a certain way. So in our listening to our, let's say we're talking here about our partner, we're listening to this partner in a certain way. I remember I used to listen to my mom in a certain way. Like I used to know that, okay, if she's talking to me about something, she's gonna tell me be careful, because in her listening, she was risk averse. Like, be careful, don't jump, don't do this, don't venture in this, don't. So in my listening to her, it was okay. I'm listening to her, and she's gonna tell me, okay, don't do this, or and which made me even more go towards this. Did you have this experience, like with your parents, when they tell you don't do this, like you do it no matter what, because you want to experience it on your own? You don't want their experience to shape yours. um, but as I grew up, I said, what if I try to listen to what is behind this be careful? And I talked to her about it. And it opened up a whole beautiful space between the two of us. Because she told me that the origin of this fear came from her dad. He was very punitive, and he would not allow her to make a mistake. So even when people occur in a certain narrative, and maybe that narrative is proven to be true because they do it so many times, by listening to them in a way, in active listening to see what's behind that narrative, you're also giving these people the space to change that narrative that they're occurring within, and they have within themselves. So you're helping them also to open up. And like, we're surprised, like people we work with, if they have the possibility to express themselves, and people we love in our life, they have the space to express themselves with you not doing anything, because you don't need to advise. No one is, I mean, no one would like to be advised about a situation, especially if they don't ask for it. And even when they ask for it, sometimes, you know, you have to maneuver in a way where whatever you're saying is compassionate and lands where it can affect a positive change in them, and not is perceived as a criticism, because narratives and criticism are also, very correlated. Or we talk like people are occurring in a certain narrative for you very many times. We're judging them for what they do, and we're creating narratives. I mean, the narrative could be very positive as well. Like you may love someone and they occur as like the the sociable person that is gonna create the big network for you in your business, or this quality assurance person who's gonna, or auditor within your business who's gonna detect any mistake. Um, but those narratives also fixate how people occur. They may have another aspect to them. They may be good networkers, but also they they could be open doors at different levels within your business. So it's always very important to be aware of the narratives, our narratives, and the narratives of the people we work with, our narratives about the people we work with.
I love it. Yeah, I would venture to say that we're not always working reality, right? We're working narrative to narrative. I love how you pointed out active listening, how important it is to listen actively. My understanding of active listening, just like a little definition, would be, you're listening to actually hear what is being said rather than listening to respond or take a particular action. Does that match what your definition of active listening is, or do you have something different?
Yes, yes. And also, um, I would add to it to listen with compassion. Listen,
Yeah,
being sensitive to other people's needs. Um,
yeah.
that listening is not a judgmental listening. So I'm not listening to you because you're right. I'm gonna respond to you as you said, and I'm gonna bring another angle uh, to it because I need to say something. Especially consultants in our business, like
Hmm.
you're hiring a consultant, you're expecting a consultant to give you another angle about the situation. So very many times, like if I am a consultant and I don't bring anything to the table, then I'm not justifying my salary, right? Or so what I try to do as a consultant, listen to what's wrong. And people sometimes expect you to do this. This is one of your business model, because you have to listen to what's wrong. You have to listen with a judgment, and we want that judgment, from time to time, because we want that eye that not really criticizes, but like sees what's we're not doing right, and that's why we
Hmm.
do evaluations and appraisals. Sometimes consultants or people who do this job have this professional, deviation in their personal life, because they start listening to what's wrong within their family and they drive their family crazy. So this is where, being aware that I'm doing this, the reason I'm being a consultant right now is to see how we can improve your business model, but it's really not to put down what you're doing right. Even if you start prefacing it in your conversation, in your business conversation, it makes you not only the other person to put this other person at ease, but if you believe it, then it makes your perspective as a consultant better. And as you preface it, as you start with this, even if you don't want to preface it, but in your mind, you're thinking, okay, I am listening here to what I can improve in your business. I'm listening to what's wrong, but also there are so many things that are right that if even in my personal life, then I say, okay, can I listen to what's right before I start fixing? Because like these people want to fix. And
Yeah.
you know, it's very difficult. A lot of people tell you, okay, don't bring your problems. I was hearing today, I was having breakfast here at I'm at a hotel, uh, and I was having a breakfast this morning, and I heard this businessman behind me, and he was telling whoever he was talking to, look, I called you to discuss our media project today. I did not call you to hear about your headache. I don't want to hear about your stomach pain. I don't want to hear about your headache. I want to hear about your media plan. Okay. Um, I mean, in reality, he's telling the truth, right? Uh, but I was wondering, how is the other person receiving that information? How
Hmm.
is that other
Yeah.
person who's not feeling well is contributing to the table with compassion and passion about the job that she's doing? I know that it was a she because I was a little bit, I couldn't not overhear the conversation because he was so loud. And so I was like a typical example of, when you're not sensitive to other people's needs, you're listening. I feel that even the listening of that, I wonder, let me put it that way, about the listening of that person when the other person on the line is talking about the media. And I'm also listening to the respect um, between people. Like,
Hmm.
it doesn't matter, like you can't dissociate what's happening personally and what's happening professionally. We dissociated at work because we don't want to bring our personal challenges to work, which is absolutely good not to do that. But as a human being, you can't dissociate it. Now, with AI doesn't have those emotions, and maybe you would have someone you would be better served by AI, by the machines who are totally objective and not subjective and giving you what you want in a nanosecond. But when you're dealing with human beings and the human qualities of human beings that we're going to long for in our new age of AI, we're going to long for these human qualities more and more. You really want to nurture this. And my advice, and what I started to do in my business long time ago, was, okay, let's have 5 minutes to talk about how we're doing. You know, let's have this 5 minutes and let people vent. We're doing great today. We're not, and go around the table and say, like, how are we doing today? And this way, those people who are not doing that great, when they see some people doing good, it raises the vibration, it raises the energy, but also it it makes you be more aware, more sensitive to your team's needs.
Hmm.
And in that way, your team members feel that they are heard.
Hmm.
So
So,
you get a better output. If you're someone who wants like output, you have to take care of the human being, um, of your team, the human being element of your team, and you will get a better output. I mean, it's a win-win, even win-win-win
yeah.
situation. Um, but before you go there, if you're interested just in your outcome, I can guarantee you that you will have a better outcome if your team is heard and they have a space to really intervene in their best of their abilities, and they feel respected and safe in that environment.
Hmm. I love it. Yeah, I think that's so important. I love it so much because I've been in different environments where, this kind of connection and compassion has been present, and other environments where it hasn't been. And I can definitely testify to what you just said. If you'll take some time to stop and smell the roses, or to stop and connect with your team, right, and your coworkers, or whatever position you might be in, you stop and connect with people. It makes a huge difference for them. And not only does everybody have a better experience, the business gets better results, right? And people are more committed to whatever the project is and the business is. It makes such a big difference. And I almost want to say, like, the old, like the behavior of this, it's all about completely separate business from personal, and it's kind of an older model. I think it's so important to be compassionate. I know that's a narrative that I've got. You probably got it too. I happen to like that narrative. I think we resonate with that. So I think it's important to be compassionate in business, because it's, at the end of the day, we are all humans, right? With the exception of our AI coworkers, right? But we're humans, and we need that. And so it's really important, really, really, really important to create that space, yeah, and keep that
Right.
connection. Yeah.
And Trace, I wanted to tell you that we're programming AI in order to be compassionate, not to feel compassion, but
Right.
to answer in a way that is compassionate, that to answer in a way that can encompass that human element in
Mm-hmm.
a respectful way. So there are a lot of programs that do that. Even in your chat GPT, sometimes, like, the thank you and be well is integrated
Yeah.
and the answers, which is a good way. It's a good way, especially for the young adults and the young leaders, um, who would like to interact and they don't have the experience, or we're the generation of look down. We're the generation where everything happens virtually, and
Mm-hmm.
less social interactions happen professionally, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people work from home. And I feel that this is such an important factor and element that human beings should not, like, we as leaders, we have to pay attention to that element at work, because
Mm-hmm.
that would be a differentiation between AI and our experience, you know our
Mm-hmm.
experience, our creativity, everything else. um, Another thing is that when we're talking about narratives, the culture of your organization is a narrative,
Mm-hmm.
your culture. And how, you'll tell me, how is that so, right? Because if we think that we have a great culture, that our culture is a culture of support, integrity, we have people who believe that this is this culture, and the core group, no matter what, even if we bring new people, if they don't adhere to this narrative, then we let them go. So narrative is also synonymous of a culture in organizations. And this is
Mm-hmm.
probably, I didn't include it in my definition before, but the more we're talking, the more I'm thinking about what else in your business and your organization occurs within that narrative.
Yeah. It makes me think of a question I guess I have for you. I don't know if it's a question or comment. Let's see how it comes out. But when we create these narratives, typically we create them based upon past experience, right? But one of the things I love that you talk about in Leap Beyond Success and in your program Leap and Evolve is creating from an emerging future, right? So what if we would start creating narratives from an emerging future? So let's say in our organization we have a particular team that has some negative narratives going on, right? What if instead of looking at that as concrete, being like, oh, that there's this negative narrative going on, what if we could reframe whatever that is from an emergent future, see it the way that we want it to be, and then kind of show up, and encourage everybody to show up from that narrative the way that we want it to be? Do you feel like that is that a realistic thing that we could do to shift the energy of a team, to shift the narrative, to create, like kind of not necessarily ignore what we've been observing, but to intentionally create something from a new potential reality, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like your question. Okay, you know me, I would say yes, we can do it and it can happen. I would recommend that we focus on one bias, one narrative that we
Mm-hmm.
have. And in order to do so, we have to be aware of that bias or
Mm-hmm.
narrative. Okay, let's take an example. Let's say uh, I'm in an organization that, and we have manufacturing, and we produce um, hair products to African Americans. Okay, because it's slightly different. The hair is coarse. The hair needs a different type of treatment, right? And I want to create something from the future for this organization. Well, the hair is coarse, it's not like I'm changing the hair. But the people who are working on creating this product, we want to have as many African American involved. And we want to make sure that our biases, inner biases, socioeconomic biases about the African Americans are dealt with in a way where we're aware of them and we want to drop them, we want to put them aside in order to create from the future. So whatever exists, so some business leaders are going to tell you we have facts. We have facts about the socioeconomic group, and we have to, um, you know, take them into consideration in pricing this product. This is a fact, right? We can't argue with a fact. But here we're talking about inner biases, like meaning that, um, well, in my media, um, in my inner bias, I'm gonna put a, um, you know, let's the size of the woman or the shape of the woman, because this what worked in the past, and this is what did not work in the past. Now, here, when we invent from the future, we let the information come from the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to fixate a narrative about our bias within the ad, although our media team may think that this ad will sell better because we're appealing to that part or that sector. You do that, but also you want to give hope for a better future. If you're putting
Mm-hmm.
a segment of your population in your ad that is fat because you think that most of the women in that socioeconomic group, because this is where you're pricing your product, is appealing to that, you want to give hope. You want that future to come from the future. You don't want the future to come from the fact of the past or the bias that you have about this group. So, my recommendation would be one bias at a time, and my recommendation would be to be aware of that bias before we invent something from the future. And in Leap,
Mhm.
I love that with your you reach out to the future and you get an information from the future and you go back to the present, and then after you foresee from the future, you bring it back in order to forereach and foretell about it. And the forereach would be the steps to make in order for this to happen. Now, in the forereach steps, you could take into considerations the facts of today. Okay, what are your studies or your data telling you about the population that you're serving today? And in your forereach, create a strategic plan for your product, not only to sell, but to affect the image of these people, to affect the future into a foreseeable future that comes from the future. And then in your narrative about it, because a marketing plan is a narrative, it's a narrative.
Yes.
In your narrative about what you're creating, to probably tell that story and tell it in the best ways that is heard by this population. And I think this is how Leap Beyond Success is really executed, because you have in mind how to affect the future positively and to impact it in a
Mhm.
positive way.
Yeah, I love the LEAP model, and I love this particular topic because you know my background with consulting and marketing and stuff, right? And so it's so great to be able to, yes, use wisdom and data from the past to create in the present to attract from the future, but not just that, create beyond that, right? And really call forth these new possibilities from the future because there's wisdom in our past and there's wisdom in our future, right? And I love the way that the LEAP process really tangibly gets you because that might sound like an abstract concept for a lot of people that are listening if they haven't read Leap Beyond Success or been through Leap and Evolve yet, right? But the way that you've put things together in a step-by-step process, it's just like you really get how you can do that and how you can create and manifest from the emerging future. And it's really, really, really powerful. And that's how we create these quantum leaps, and that's how we create these new things that the world has never seen before, right? That's the way that we have to do things. And any kind of plan that you put together, it's a narrative. And yeah, you just want to really be conscious about what you're creating and if you're creating from the past or from the future and how you're enrolling people into the narrative as well, right? I love how in Leap you also talk about the process of enrolling and what that really means. Because when you can really understand what enrollment truly is, then you can enroll people into an empowering narrative, right? You can get them to maybe drop one that hasn't been empowering, and you can enroll them in the possibilities of a brand new narrative. And when we talk about leadership and teams and organizations and also having an impact on society and maybe even changing cultural narratives, right, over time, it's all possible when we are consciously aware of what we're dealing with and we have the tools in our toolbox to make these changes, to cause these powerful shifts, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the fact that, um, when we're aware of the narrative, we are aware also that the narrative keeps moving and changing. And if we want it, but if you fixate it, then you're killing your model. Things will stay the same, and we don't stay the same. we, Nothing stays that. Like even each cell is regenerating. We're changing constantly. um,
Hmm.
there are things that stay the same if we want them to stay the same as the original narrative that is not allowing us to move forward. But we don't have to do that. We have the tool. We can change it, and changing it with foreseeing a better future in whatever we do is the purpose of Leap. This is how we're leaping in whatever we
Hmm.
do, in changing our narrative think about what do we want to see in the future, whether we're creating a product, we're doing a service, whatever we're creating, even for ourselves, what do we want to see in the future? And the principle of enrolling people in that future possibility, then it becomes like, if as a group we're foreseeing something. Now, for reaching is all the action plans in order to get somewhere. Then foretelling is to enroll people. In the foretell, this is what we're doing. If we're enrolling your investor, is to enroll them in that narrative. If you're enrolling this potential customer, you're enrolling them into how they're going to feel if they're using this product. So in a future possibility that is so real for them, and what is it that it's going to create in their life? Why is it positive? Why is it going to affect their life in a positive way? And this is a like the vicious circle where we're enrolled in something, negative that would create, a swirl to bring us downward. This could be a leap, you know, a vicious circle of positiveness that could
Yeah.
lead us to leap and to jump. So where do we want to go each moment of our creation? Do we want to go there in that positive future, or do we want to stay here and get attached to, you know, something that probably we feel comfortable because we're nesting, we're not moving, but we know that life doesn't happen that way. It's going to move whether we like it or not. So we better, be flexible enough and positive enough. And I'm not saying positive, irrealistically positive, but positive in what is possible, in order for what
Yeah.
possible to show up in a new narrative.
Yeah, to have a positive expectation, right? I love how you said that there's a vicious cycle, right? But what if we create this vicious cycle that's positive? Then that's a good type of vicious cycle. I like that a lot. I like also about expectation, right? There's been a lot of things that we get to enjoy in the world now that were thought as once by probably the majority of the population as an unreasonable expectation or idea or whatever, right? So it's really interesting to challenge what we think is possible and what's not possible and what that narrative is about what's possible. And likewise, you also mentioned something about the comfort zone. Our comfort zone is a tricky, tricky little thing because when we're looking at an opportunity or we're looking at a narrative, um, we might look at a particular narrative or idea that would stretch us and that feels a bit uncomfortable, and it causes a certain reaction in our physiology. Maybe there's some fear in there, where it's like, oh, I don't know if that feels good, right? So I'm going to look at this other narrative, which feels much more comfortable, right? This was a big awareness and shift for me, is looking at that and being like, hey, wait a minute. It's not that this other narrative feels more comfortable. It's that it feels more familiar because I've lived it in some way in the past already. So if we want to really shift our narrative, this is us as an individual for our own narrative, maybe having to do with our self-worth or self-image, or it could be inside our organization, like what we're capable of creating, achieving, doing in the world. We want to really look at this thing that feels like maybe a stretch or a risk or whatever. Um, you know, is it just feeling uncomfortable because we haven't gone there before, or is it because it's not a good idea? Right? It's really important to tune into, I think, or be aware of our comfort zone and where we're being challenged outside of our comfort zone, and to go for that new narrative anyway. Because it's not always. I think that we can make anything fun, but it doesn't always, especially initially, until we're super consciously aware, it doesn't always necessarily feel fun. It can feel scary, right, to change a narrative that's been present perhaps for decades, right? Um, so it's interesting.
Yeah. So definitely what you're saying. Like I totally agree um, that we we don't like change very much because we get into our comfort zone and we're nesting and it feels good. It feels like, oh great, we mastered this stage and we want to stay that. We want to stay there because I know that I can coordinate my time. I can wake up in the morning. I could do my exercise. I could do this, but with a change, then it's gonna stretch me. Maybe I won't be able to, you know, do my exercise in the morning because I have to work hard. Maybe I won't be able to attend to, my friend or my kids, or it's stretching me. So we're constantly afraid of this change because it's going to affect our life. Like, this is where I say, okay, we want to say that our profession and our personal life are separate. We can say as much as we want, but at the end of the day, when there is a change, it's going to affect your personal life. And if it's going to affect your personal life, you're going to resist it, right? We, we could say whatever we want, but this is the reality. And this is where the resistance happens. Now, leap could happen as a big jump, but leap could happen as smaller jumps. This is where we're stretching out of this comfort zone to get to the next level. But as we're stretching, it's not comfortable, as you said. It's scary, it's not comfortable. But then we adjust. And this is like adaptation. So, adaptation is a very important factor in here when we stretch. When we adapt, after the adaptation is the comfort zone. Now we're in a comfort zone. We adapted, we're in a comfort zone. We like it the way we created. We don't want to move. Then another jump happens. We're going to have more and more trace of these now in this AI age or disruption age. This digital age is not going to let us adapt for long or stay in that stretch of adaptation and comfort zone for long, because it's going to push us to the next level and the next level and the next level and the next level. Will be interesting to me to see how, as a human being, with we're going to adapt to this and how we're going to respond to that. And if we're smart enough right now, we can start creating what is it as human qualities we need in order to flex our muscles for the next level, at the same time be able to create those human qualities of creativity, adaptation, experience, and create that restfulness and calmness, and this journey where everything we're bombarded with new things, new levels of adaptations, new information, new technology, and our brain is not wired that way. So what are the human qualities that we're going to create? What is the new narrative that we're going to occur within as humans in order for us to win this disruptive age that is here, that we're dealing with right now, and we're going to deal more and more and more and more with.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great opportunity, right? Especially if we can approach it with that attitude of it being a great opportunity to bring awareness to the world about, hey, we've got narratives and we can shift things if we really want to. It's just a question of, are we willing to, right? And I think awareness is the first step. So it's great what's happening with the disruption because, in a way, while very uncomfortable and while it does present some challenges, it also presents a lot of great opportunities. And especially on this topic of the narratives, it's like it may shine a light for people on what narratives are currently running and give them the opportunity to shift them more, right? So I now have a question for you. So let's say I believe that unless we're super active in personal growth and this sort of topic, I think a lot of narratives that we have, whether as an individual or as a team or as an organization or maybe even as a culture, we're not necessarily aware that we even have particular narratives. Do you have an easy gateway for people to start to realize what are the narratives that I have right now, or what are the narratives that my organization has right now, or what are the narratives running in society right now? Is there any little tip? I know it may be too big of a request, but is there a tip that you have for people to like start to shine the light on, hey, what's present, what's occurring?
So first, as you said, if we're not aware of them, we have to become aware of them. So how do we become aware of a narrative that is running our life? Let's start at the personal level. If you keep getting the same results in your life, in your business, and results that you don't like, then you're trapped. In my book, I call the dream trap. Your dream is trapped in your narrative. There's no ifs or buts about it. You keep getting the same results. Your dream is trapped. There is a narrative. So you stop and you start questioning this narrative. Then you know that you're not aware of a narrative that is running your life or your business. You have to stop and check what is going on behind the scene. What is the narrative? What is the culture, the group culture of your team or your business that is stopping that growth from happening? So you stop, you listen, you question. That's how you move forward. And there are tools, as you said, in Leap Beyond Success, there are tools to do that, to question and become aware, and then you'll be able to shift it. There are tools to shift that narrative as well. So this is for the personal and the business. The personal also in your personal life. If you keep getting the same results, you keep having the same reaction from your partner or your kids or your siblings, you have to stop. When something is recurrent and you're not liking, it is trapped in your narrative about it. You have something to do with it. And the people hate when I tell them this. And I know it's hard to hear that, okay, I keep getting this. I want to be a victim of the circumstances. You're not. You're part of it. Because whatever is happening is trapped in your narrative about it. When you become aware of this, then you can stop and you can shift it. If you're not aware of it, you won't be able to shift it. So awareness, awareness, awareness. Stop, ask your question, become aware. If you can't become aware by yourself, as I said in my book, you get a mentor, you get a coach, you get help, which is very nice. Sometimes we can't do things alone, especially if you're stuck in an addictive behavior. You won't be able to do it alone sometimes. Or addiction, chemical addiction, or whatever addiction you have. Stop. You're getting the same results. Stop. Become aware that you're addicted. Go get help. Now,
Yeah.
on the society level, we have to become aware of our biases about groups and individuals, and a lot of biases here about social identity, gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, religion. Um, I mean, a lot of biases. And I'm not saying that, oh, you have to tackle all this at once. Um, whatever is bothering you, whatever you're you're getting a reaction towards, you know, if you're getting a reaction towards prejudices, or if you're getting a reaction towards stereotyping, or you're getting a reaction towards discrimination, well, stop, become aware, go find a group that handles, you know, a support group that handles this, and do your share, help as much as you can. You won't be able to handle all biases. You won't be able to transform the world except if you transform something within yourself. And you won't be able to help at all levels, but help at a small level that appeals to you, where you feel that there is a reaction and you can help. Because as individuals, we're not helpless, but we can't do it all. And we can't do everything. So we honor our limitations and whatever appeals to us, and you will feel good, even if discrimination happens in the world, that at your own level, you're moving the needle just a little. This is where you create the purpose and the meaning in your life. And you're changing a certain narrative. Maybe you won't be able to do it during this lifetime, but you're doing something that could last beyond you. And this is where we leap beyond ourselves. We leap beyond our own success into a future that, even if we're not here, that leap will take the form that it takes, and it will continue to affect positively and create that legacy that we want to create as as leaders in this world.
Yeah, it's great to want to create whatever we want to create for ourselves in our lives, for our own experience. But it's so wonderful to lean beyond that, like you talk about leaping beyond success, just traditional concepts of success, and think about that. Like, what if whatever change you want to see might not happen in your lifetime, right? Are you still going to do something about it or not? I think it's a great idea that really inspires me, um, because life is going to go on when we're not, personally, physically here anymore, right? But what about what's next? What are we leaving here? What kind of an impression of increase are we leaving for those who will come next? I think that's a beautiful idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, the Hamilton on Broadway. Hamilton said, like, it was in Hamilton, and I love this sentence. Like, what is legacy? Legacy is planting a seed in a garden you will never get to see. That's your
Yeah.
legacy. That's your legacy.
Yeah.
This is our legacy. Is
Yeah.
sometimes planting a seed in a garden that we will never get to see. Maybe we'll see a little bit. Maybe we will never get to see. But at
Yeah.
least what you're doing, you're giving a purpose to what you're doing, a meaning. You're changing a narrative of, you're changing a narrative. You're changing a bias. You're changing something about discrimination. This is at the social level, right?
Yeah.
Or you're changing something in your organization that's going to affect the future generation. Who knows what you're doing? But it may be that seed that you'll never get to see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool to think about what's possible. Yeah.
It's
So,
cool.
Micheline, um, when we're focused on changing a narrative, whether it's our own or whether it's something at the organizational level or the society level, and we meet resistance within ourselves and or with others, what's one thing that you would advise people to do when you feel that resistance, whether it's internal or external? What do we do?
Yeah, I remember I had a quality assurance director in the past that used to love resistance. She used to tell me, when you meet resistance, it means that you're making improvements. And
Mm.
and I always kept this in my mind. I said, like, oh, And she was very experienced, and in quality assurance she has to change things. And she said, I love it when I meet resistance. This is where I feel that I'm moving something. We resist to change. So when you feel resistance, keep in mind that that resistance may mean most likely that you're moving the needle, you're moving forward. And this is where when people meet resistance, sometimes they drop, like they drop it. Like, let's not go there. Let's not do this project. There is so much resistance. No, evaluate, what is this resistance coming from? And it may mean that we are making progress.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm hearing you basically say evaluate the resistance and most likely just embrace it, right? Because it's a sign that you're making progress. It's a sign
Yeah.
you're heading in the right direction. It's one thing that always actually confused me for a long time because I heard two different philosophies taught in the world of personal development. One was resistance is natural, like if an airplane's taking off, it's going to meet the resistance of the wind and everything, but it's got to get past that in order to get in the air. But then the other philosophy is there's a law of non-resistance because if you're resisting too much energetically, then you can't attract what you want to you, right? So that was one thing that was always confusing for me. But I'm starting to more and more, especially working with you, realize this concept of resistance, like you talked about. It's a good sign, and it's something that you should then be the observer of, but not necessarily get entangled with, right? I think that's where those two philosophies meet. That's my current perception anyway. The resistance is there, observe it, keep moving anyway if it's in the direction of what you want to create. But then energetically, internally, um, don't have like just kind of shift your narrative about the resistance, right? And emotionally feel okay with it and be like, oh, it's just a part of the game, right? Would you agree with that?
Right. When you shift the narrative, because we're talking about narratives today and how important they are in everything we do in our life, how we occur in narratives. So resistance occurs in that narrative. And as we're resisting, you're right. Energetically speaking, we're not attracting something positive as you're resisting because you're creating like a lot of friction and negative things happen. But as we shift our narrative about the resistance, then energetically we feel more at ease with it, then we can attract and manifest more positive things in our life. So it's not necessarily contradicting as like the two views that you have, but it's like, let's, when you have a breakdown in your life, like people think that that's it, but very many times after the breakdown a breakthrough happens. That's kind of like what you look at the resistance, like after this resistance the breakthrough can happen, and you can help it by changing your narrative. So narratives, if we learn something today, if I want to leave you with something today, is the importance of narratives and how everything occurs within narratives. And whatever we want to change or we want to manifest, we have to create it and manifest it within changing our narratives about it. So and that is, I'm not saying it's easy to change the narrative, but what I'm saying is accessible to everyone to be able to change the narrative, if, of course, that person wants to. You know, if you want to, it's accessible to you. And if you don't know how, there are tools available.
I love it. Yeah, you've got some great tools inside your book, Leap Beyond Success, and
Great.
also inside Leap and Evolve. You've got this amazing online program. Those of you listening, if you haven't looked at Leap Beyond Success or Leap and Evolve, uh, underneath where you're listening to this, there should be some links there for you to click on where you can go and explore that. But you mentioned the word easy, Micheline. It's not always easy to do this, like to reframe the narratives and realize which ones you've got and go through that process, especially when you start to notice the internal and external resistance. But these tools make it easy because you basically just follow the step-by-step process that Micheline has created for you. And there's worksheets and stuff, and in the book there's exercises. If you just follow the steps and you're gentle with yourself, right? I love that's one of the things you talk about, Micheline, is being gentle with yourself and giving yourself the time and space to do it, it's totally possible. And just to underscore how important this is for everyone, like the narratives that you hold, it has the potential to shape the experience that you have of life, to shape, like if you feel like you've got any traumas from your past, or you've got things that are just weighing on you emotionally or mentally or even physically, when you shift your narratives around whatever that previous occurrence is, it's like taking the backpack off. It's like you can really leave that in the past, and it's so powerful. And when we talk about creation, if you want to create something in the world, when we talk about success, whatever that means for you, and we talk about leaping beyond success, right, and leaving this legacy that, maybe it's the seed that you plant that you never even get to see. The narrative you hold is completely going to shape what you actually experience and create. So that's how important this is. So definitely recommend pick up the book at a minimum, Leap Beyond Success. And if you would like to work with Micheline in a little more interactive sort of format with videos and stuff, it's really incredible. Look at the link below for Leap and Evolve, because it's incredible. So thank you, Micheline, for today. Any other final notes you want to share before we wrap up this episode?
I would love for my audience to interact with me, tell me what is the benefit they're getting, where do they want me to go more, to discuss more, what is the help that they need assistance with, because my goal is to really listen and actively listen and walk the talk, um, and be able to deliver uh, and answer your expectations. So I want to thank you so much for listening, for being engaged in changing your narratives, changing your life, changing something within your profession to make things easier on yourself and happier and impactful on others. Thank you.
Incredible. I love it. So, as Micheline said, we have this a certain narrative, right, that we have based upon her elite framework and tools that we're sharing with you, because we know it's so incredible. And I love Micheline's invitation to you to help us shape the narrative, right? Shape the narrative of future podcasts and all the content that we're creating. Like, let's shape it together. So, yes, thank you, Micheline, for inviting everyone to submit what it is that they desire. How can we help more? And because at the end of the day, as you say, Micheline, like, we're here for you guys. Like, we have a lot of fun in these conversations, but we could do this offline too, right? So we're here for you. Thank you for listening today. It's a great honor to be with you, even though we're not physically in the same space together. We're really virtually connecting through this podcast and through other pieces of content, and it's great. It's great to be together. So I hope you have some fun shifting some narratives for yourself and for the world. And thanks again for being here. Thank you, Micheline. Incredible content as always together. Great ideas and energy, and so grateful for the work you're doing in the world and for inviting me along to be here with you.
And please like it so we can create more of it, and subscribe so we're encouraged to create more and more and answer your need. Thank you.